Ukraine's president is in London to meet European leaders for talks on the terms of a US-backed deal to end Russia's war. Zelensky is due to meet Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Downing Street in the hours ahead. They're going to talk about Ukraine's post-war future. And in the last half an hour or so, NATO has said it too plans to meet Zelensky later today when he travels to Brussels to meet EU leaders there. Well, the president is under pressure to accept a draft peace deal which would see Ukraine giving up large parts of its territory and significant political and military control to Russia. Well, President Trump was at the Kennedy Center on Sunday evening, where he expressed frustration with President Zelensky's seeming reluctance to accept the deal.
I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't. Russia's fine with it. Russia, I guess, would rather have the whole country when you think of it. But Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it.
Well, here's our reporter in Kyiv, Joel Gunter.
A key meeting for President Zelensky today. He's in London. He will be looking to shore up support for Ukraine from its key European allies, including Sir Keir Starmer, as you mentioned there. On the agenda for them in London today, it's going to be security guarantees for Ukraine going forward, ongoing military support. Obviously, there is a little bit of a question mark still around the level of influence that Ukraine's European allies are able to have on this process. They were somewhat sidelined early on as the US devised that first iteration of the peace plan, which leaked and shocked both Ukraine and its European allies. And people said at the time that it looked, at least in part, like a peace plan that could have been devised by Russia. So a key meeting for Ukraine in London today, and coming just hours ahead of that, this sort of surprise and somewhat off-the-cuff interjection by President Trump, who is once again putting pressure directly on President Zelensky, saying that Russia is fine with the plan. The Ukrainian people love the plan, which is a dubious statement from our vantage point here in Ukraine, but singling out President Zelensky as the person who is holding up efforts to bring about peace.
And Joel, just remind us, what's the latest situation on the ground there where you are?
We had another weekend of fairly heavy strikes here in Ukraine, this time targeting critical infrastructure, which means for Ukrainians ongoing pain. They were already experiencing extended blackouts, power cuts to households, a lack of heating. And that is really serious at this time of year as Ukrainians are coming into the depths of winter. So not a great deal of hope here in Ukraine about the peace process. They are very cynical about Russia's position, about its demand that it should be given, essentially handed additional territory during the peace process that it has been unable to capture on the battlefield. That is something of a red line for Ukrainians. So how close we are to a final peace agreement seems still very uncertain.
Thanks to Joel for that, giving me an update in the last hour or so. And also in the last hour, I spoke to Ivana Klimpush-Tsintsadze, Ukrainian politician and chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Integration of Ukraine to the European Union, and asked first about these talks in London.
It's critical for us to have a common stance with our European partners and to make sure that this stance is not only unified, but is backed by action that would envisage a real deterrence for Russian push, which is unfortunately right now backed by the American administration, to finish the war as Russia sees it, on basically having Ukraine surrender to Russian demands and having new spheres of or redefined spheres of influence again inserted in a European continent.
OK, let's move on to the latest with the peace plan, this US-backed peace plan. We heard Donald Trump basically accuse the Ukrainian president of not reading it and saying that the Ukrainian people love the deal. What do you think of that?
Well, definitely, there is no Ukrainian that would love that deal. at least something that we are hearing about that. Nobody really informed the Ukrainian society what that particular plan envisages, besides the things that we are hearing through the media, as like giving up on the territories that have not been occupied, recognizing our own territories as part of Russia, having limitations on all of our sovereign decisions in the future. I don't think that any Ukrainian would support it, even though we are definitely quite exhausted and pretty tired of this constant and brutal aggression of the Russian Federation. But again, we do understand that in order to have the future, well, it's not only about survival, but it's also about sovereignty and the country still holding to the remnants of the international law, thus also not recognizing the withdrawal of the borders of Ukraine.
And how do you feel when you hear the US president pressuring Ukraine to accept the deal rather than Russia, the aggressor?
Well, I think we've had the whole 2025 to finally digest that we are having to deal with a totally different United States as we knew it for decades up till now, and that unfortunately the United States right now does not care that much about the international law, about the results of this war that will if following this path that Russia and the U.S. right now are suggesting, will create new conflicts and new war fires across the globe. And so I think for us right now it's critical to line up with our European partners and be strong together. And that's maybe the language that both Russian Federation and the United States would understand.
So thank you to Ivana Klimpushkin-Sadze speaking to me just a little earlier. And just to mark your card, let's take you to Downing Street now, where we are expecting those leaders, world leaders. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will be hosting Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky and others in Downing Street a little later. There's clearly another group visit going on there at